So here's what we're gonna do, right? Familiar territory, right? I'm gonna do the whole thing, right? It's all slippery. Hand me a paper towel. Actually, I got a towel. It's just wet. That's what we did before. Come on.
Yeah, it's getting out. Mine didn't come out that cleanly. Okay.
I'm going fairly fast because this is all familiar territory, or at least should begin to look familiar,
So you
right?
over
I'm scraping
the
the
joint.
bone, but on top of the bone. So what I want to do is begin breaking the connections between all of this connective tissue and the bone itself, because then it's going to sever and separate cleanly. That's the only way to get the
Yeah.
I'm just using a towel because it gives me better grip. Paper towel would do as well. Right? I want to extend the joint way out, brace my thumb underneath the joint like an anvil, and then break it right across its. There it goes. Give me a little fight. Break it across its direction. Normal direction of movement. So cut that off. Little duck wangs. These would be good too. These, if you want to try to serve them like you would a chicken wing, they really need simmering before, because you can see all this in you. They're pretty tough. So now I've got 2 French wings. I'm going to separate, right? So there's a lot of skin and a lot of fat, so you really need to sort of plan for opening up this join so you can see what you're doing, but be conscious that also we want a nice covering of skin for the breast, because we're going to make an airline out of it. So here I've got, right, the same join that we saw in the chicken, right? The pelvis is down here, the thigh bone is here, and I want to cut underneath, way underneath the pelvis. The pelvis abducts is super flat, like that, and so look how much meat came off the backside of it, right? A big flat section, right? I'm going to break the socket and then move the knife in a slicing motion, right? So I'm laying it down through the socket there, and then I'm going to rotate my knife and cut downward into that hollow that's just beyond. See the socket there? Right? And there's a hollow of the pelvis right there. Grab the ankle, pull it towards its little head, and that should come off cleanly with the oyster intact. Alright, so you can see. The pelvis on these is much flatter, but the technique still works really nicely. I don't know. These guys are actually older than a chicken would be at the same weight. They grow a little bit more slowly. So I'm just going to open up this margin so I can really see what I'm doing, and I can also sort of better put the skin, make sure the skin has a nice covering over the breast. So if I peel that back, I can see the line of fat here. It tells me where the thigh joins the pelvis. Right? I can grab that, stand it up, pop the socket, cut through the joint. It's a little bit bumpier. Right? You may find that it's a bit tougher to open up. Right? I'm going to get through that socket, and then there's the, it's hard to see it, there's the socket right there, that sort of bloody hole. Right, so that I can see a lot better. There's a little spur of bone there. I just want to get my knife beyond the opening of the socket. See it really well now? So just like 1 millimeter beyond the socket, and cut in to sever all the tendon connections of the oyster to the bastard. Right, so there's my 2 legs, and we're going to leave those whole because we're going to give them to another class de confit. We're going to cook them in the rendered fat. So we want to save all of this skin and all of this stuff as well. So all of that fat gets trimmed and saved. And they render the fat first, and then they really slowly cook the legs and all the fat. Right. So now that I've got the Frenched wing bones, fairly familiar, split the skin so you share it nicely between both portions.
Skin's quite thick, right?
Yeah, it's very fatty, very thick, and so it's a little bit of work. Knives are already getting dull. A lot of blades on bone. All right, so now I can see the keel. The keel is really funky potato chip shaped, right? And it's less proud, less pronounced than the chicken was, right? See its shape? Isn't that strange? Right? there's a wishbone in here, but it's big and fat and round. So the same sort of thing, I want to get just to the outside of it and trace its outline, right? And then get back up underneath it and get all this muscle here away from the rib cage so that I don't waste any. So I'm gonna just keep shaving the connection of muscle to this. There's a lot more cartilage, and there's a big sort of hollow in the thing too. You look at it, so there's a lot more meat in there than you'd think, because look at the whole shape of the keel bone. It's sort of scooped out and dips way down. So the thinking process through this should be, how do I keep myself in contact with that cartilage and not start wandering around in the lean tissues? So now I'm looking at ribs there. Right? I want to make sure that I work along the full length of the seam. Right? So the whole rib cage is, a little bit sort of collapsed compared to the chicken. So the same thing, gather the bone up with the breast meat. If I move it around, I can see, right? There's a big tendon there in the joint. See the joint there? You can go through the middle of the joint and remove that. Right, so I got an Airline duck breast. Nice French bone. Trim up the edges so they look really pretty. Save any fat that you trim up, because it's going to go along with the legs as part of the mise en place. You can separate the tenderloins though. Or not tenderloins, but tenders. All right, so you have tenders. And then I don't want to aggressively trim this any more than I have to, because it's going to shrink really aggressively as well. I can take some of this stuff off the backside, but be careful that you don't sort of disconnect the wing bone at the same time. I might be able to take some of this off without doing too much damage. Try to get underneath it. Again, you don't want to just sort of separate all these parts, because you work so hard to keep them together. So that's about it. That's done. Just make sure that the edges are really nicely trimmed. They should be slightly larger than the actual duck breast. If you want to, in the restaurant, trim them a little further, it's good. They need work. Right, so I've got now